In this portion, we will talk about triaging tech needs. Over the course of the last few months, we have done quite a bit of research about what is going to make for the best camp experience tech-wise. Unfortunately, it might be too late to order some things or to upgrade your Ethernet connection, etc. So we will discuss a few options to make the best of the situation that we currently have. So to begin with, we will discuss the strong recommendations that we have. This includes how to optimize your internet connection, the type of headset that we would recommend, whether or not there's benefits to having a second monitor, including external web cameras, external mouse and keyboards, the necessity of having a computer that can run Microsoft Office and Zoom, and to ensure that you have enough hard drive space for the things that you will be downloading throughout camp. So the most important thing in our opinion is the quality of internet connection that you have. The best option, of course, is to be hardwired into your Ethernet. For some people, this just is not an option. The modem is someplace far away from where you'll be doing debates and will become very, very difficult. Sure, there are great Wi-Fi routers out there that can be used to ensure that you are connected, but most Wi-Fi routers that people have are not designed for the demands that are put on it in 2020, particularly with so many people working at home. Many routers are designed to have 10 devices connected at once, and they have to throttle the amount of data that they can receive and send as more and more devices get connected. So if you think about what you have connected in your home at any given moment, you'll have phones, other people using the internet, some people streaming television programs, playing video games, your Alexa, your Google Home, stuff like that. It puts a huge task on the Wi-Fi router. So it is possible to buy better Wi-Fi routers, but making sure that they are capable of handling debate needs are necessary. So when you're looking at ads for these routers, the more devices that they can connect, the better. Even then, though, you might run into some issues. So there are some options that we think are better than others, including the Google Wi-Fi, which is pretty seamless, and what we use in my house and have had no issues with internet connections whatsoever. It has Ethernet-like speed, but it's not the cheapest option available. There's also Wi-Fi repeaters out there. These are pretty useful if you are close enough to your Wi-Fi router that you can plug in the repeater to your wall and run an Ethernet cord from that repeater into your computer. This will increase your speed a fair bit, but might sometimes still run into some lag issues or latency issues during debates. Many computers do not have Ethernet ports in them. It's just a product of the way they were designed in 2019, 2020. So sometimes you have to buy a little adapter. I have a USB-C adapter that I use in order to plug in my Ethernet connection. I think I got this for like $10 off of Amazon. Anything will do. You can also get it for a regular USB port. They're pretty nifty. They also provide you with some expanded plug-in space for other options. Headsets. This is the next strong recommendation that we have, and pretty important. The headset that I'm using right now, as well as the rest of the Michigan coaching staff, is the one on the right, this Logitech headset. While they're sold out on Logitech's website, they are available in other places for a cheaper price. It's worked incredibly so far. Watching debates, we've had debaters use them. Great clarity and very little issues with picking up background sound. Sometimes that won't work. Maybe you can't find this one. Video game headsets are also fine. Of all of them that we've tested, we've run into no issues with a single one, except for sometimes they plug into a computer with a USB port and not the regular headphone jack that some people want to use. So make sure you check that when you're looking at them. But they're designed for playing video games and pretty awesome overall. It's also important when you buy them to make sure that they have the little foam covering over the microphone to protect from getting too much boom sound from you talking, and especially at speed during during debates. The prices of these have gone up dramatically. When we first started doing testing, this Runmus headset was around $20, and as you can see now, it's $41 on Amazon. So keep an eye out and just look around. But this is something that you will want to have come your first debates, just so that way your judges and opponents can hear you as well as possible. At the same time, you're able to limit out the outside noise that you are hearing. Second monitor is not an absolute necessity, but it sure makes debates way nicer. So what we can see here in this picture is my office setup at the beginning of online debates, with my laptop having my flows, and then I have Zoom and Verbatim open on my external monitor. In the months since this has happened, I have not thought about changing my approach to this in any way, just because it provides me with a great deal of flexibility to see what's going on in the debate, see my flows, and read evidence as the debate's going on. If you are debating, you are likely going to be flowing on paper, so what would be replace my flow on my laptop would likely just be my Dropbox or files, which would help quite a bit. Pretty much any external monitor will do as long as it's widescreen. It's not necessary to spend much money on it because you're not playing video games, watching movies, and they're all pretty decent. This monitor here is a few years old, probably 5 years old, and I think I bought it for like 80 bucks originally. So certainly a cheap option to make things easier. Along with this, you will see that I have an external keyboard, and there's a mouse someplace off picture. This makes the debates much easier because I can have a full range of keyboard options and hotkeys that I've programmed, and I don't have to mess with the trackpad at any point, basically making my laptop a external CPU, and it's like it's a desktop in some ways that I can just unplug and move around. This is a great setup, and it does not require a whole lot of work to get this going. If you can't have a second monitor, that's perfectly fine. It's just a question of ease, and making sure that you don't have to flip through so many tabs in the process. A software recommendation that we have is the purchasing of an external web camera. As you can see, this is a chart from Logitech. It kind of breaks down the benefits of an external web camera versus an embedded web camera. I think the biggest perk of all of this is that you are able to control a little bit more of what your workspace looks like, as well as how you are framed in the picture. If I was using the webcam in my laptop right now, you'd probably see much more of my face, and it would look like I was playing a video game than my office behind me. Same thing goes for debating. It also means that if you want to stand up during your speeches, you can, and it just requires a little bit of movement of your webcam to make sure that you're framed like you would be usually in a debate. Where if you're using your laptop, it's going to be a bit of a process to get everything framed correctly. So, soft recommendation: these are you do not need to buy anything expensive when it comes to these, because again, you're not making high quality films, or you're not making a Star Wars movie, so you can get by pretty cheaply with this. If you do decide to get a web camera, though, make sure when you are setting it up that you are using the microphone in your headset, just for because that's always going to have a higher quality video or audio fidelity than what you will through any type of web camera. Hard drive space is going to be a little bit more necessary this year than in years past. You don't need much, probably 2 gigs will get you by just fine. This is for storing your files and blocks, as well as your catalog of speeches that you will be recording and sending to your coaches and lab leaders. Just make sure that you've cleared up enough space. Usually not a problem. Most computers have plenty of space built into them. You might just have to uninstall a video game or two as camp goes on, but not much of an issue there. The other thing that you have to keep in mind is that your computer needs to be able to run Microsoft Office and Zoom simultaneously. Zoom is something you'll get through the university as you're setting up, and it won't be much of an issue. But Microsoft Office is how Verbatim is run. And while you can use Google Documents and some other forms, it's not nearly as seamless because there's been 15 years of debate effort put into Microsoft Office and Verbatim, and not much effort put into making Google Docs or something like that useful for those needs. So if you have any questions about tech needs, or if you'd like somebody to vet something particular, just shoot me an email at fifelski@umich.edu, and I'd be happy to discuss that with you. Thank you. Goodbye.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dustin Myers-Levy, and I'm here with a few other members of the Michigan debate team to talk about the next part of this online debate lecture, which is your setup before the debate. So we'll all go around and introduce ourselves first. Val.
Hi, I'm Val McIntosh. I'm a debate coach at the University of Michigan and at Niles West High School.
Thomas.
Hi, my name is Thomas Vance. I'm a rising senior at the University of Michigan, and I'm also on the debate team, if that wasn't obvious.
Jonah.
Hi, I'm Jonah. I'm also a rising senior on the Michigan debate team.
Brandon.
Hey, I'm Brandon Strauss, and I'm a rising junior on the debate team.
All right, now without further ado, let's get into it.
So the first thing that we're going to talk about is how to set up to have an effective online debate. And the first thing I want to talk about is setting up your space for debating. So one of the biggest priorities for the space you want to debate in is how to set up your desk in a way that will be useful for online debates. So a couple things to keep in mind and that I would recommend is, first, make sure that you have a sufficient space to flow. And so I would recommend using a larger table or desk than you might use for just doing homework or cutting cards, because you're going to need independent space to, set up your actual debating area, potentially an external monitor if you choose to use one, somewhere that you can set your stand up, and somewhere that you can flow on that desk. And so you might need a little bit more space than you would have otherwise anticipated. If you can, I would recommend putting your laptop on a stand. You can buy them on Amazon. They're very cheap. But also just putting it on top of a couple of old textbooks or something like that would accomplish basically the same goal. And it keeps your computer set up slightly higher, and because of that, it gets you a better line of sight for your webcam if you're using an internal built-in webcam, or if you have your external webcam set on top of your computer. I would recommend also using a stand because I think it creates a little bit more space to flow. So for example, my computer is set up on a stand in front of me that actually has some space underneath it, so I could use a little bit more of my desk space than I would have otherwise been able to if my computer was just sitting on the desk. But whatever you decide to do, you should make sure it works for you. So for example, you might choose to put your flows between you and your laptop, between your laptop and your mouse, or just all the way on the side. And so for example, if you're using a relatively large desk space, you might want to consider having a chair with wheels, like an office style chair that you can kind of move back and forth relatively quickly and easily between the different parts of your desk and what you're using at any given time. You should also consider using an external keyboard if that's more comfortable for you. That's what I choose to use, because that way I can keep my computer up and not have to put my, sort of lunge forward to get to my keyboard. Instead, I can set it up right at a place, a height that's comfortable for me. And I use a little gel pad thing to provide more support for my wrists, so I'm not, making myself uncomfortable sitting at my desk all day. The second thing I would say is when you're determining this space, you should find a quiet space in your house that is going to both stop your family from bothering you and stop you from bothering them. So when you're having a debate, you're going to be loud and speaking fast. And if you have a parent or a sibling on a conference call in a room next door, you don't want them to be able to hear you spreading through the walls. And so you want to consider where your desk setup is as it relates to how likely it is you're going to affect what other people in your house are doing, but also so that there aren't people constantly walking in to your room or wherever the space is that you're working while you're having a debate and then potentially interrupting you. I would also recommend setting it up, and this kind of is redundant with stuff Kurt has already talked about, but try to either use a corded Ethernet connection or set up close to your router, and I think that will help a lot to improve your video quality. And that's something you have to consider when you decide where you want to set up your desk. You should also request to your family that during the times just when you're having a debate, if they can, try to reduce their pressure on the internet. So avoiding having 4 people streaming different things on Netflix while you are doing a debate, and vice versa. Try to say, hey, if I'm not, I have a debate for the next 2 hours, can you avoid doing a Zoom call or streaming Netflix, and then here are the other times when I will try to reduce my internet footprint, so that way you're not just asking things of them, because ultimately you only have a limited amount of bandwidth, and any different things that are being done on different computers and using a lot of internet bandwidth are ultimately going to affect each other. The next thing I would say is figuring out how you're going to set up a stand, or if you're going to set up a stand. So when I was judging at the TOC, I saw some people who chose to just debate while sitting because it was easier for them and for their tech setup, and that's fine. Another option is, and I think that in general, most people feel more comfortable debating with a stand and while standing. And so the things you have to keep in mind for that are, 1, that you have enough space on your desk to set up your stand, and 2, that you have a long enough Ethernet cord or HDMI cord to plug into your external monitor if you're using one, so that way you're not knocking things over or stretching those cords when you set up your stand. So I would recommend practicing what that looks like for you before you have your first online debate. The last thing I would recommend is that everyone should time everything, particularly in online debates. I think this is important because if there's a technical problem that happens, being able to stop your timer and everyone be on the same page for where a speech, at what point a speech stopped and needs to restart, is important. And so I would recommend using an external timer, one of these guys. But you can also choose to use one on your computer. Again, though, like I said before, the potential downside of using the timer on your computer is if your computer crashes or freezes, then you're not going to be able to say hey, my computer froze, I have 4 minutes and 30 seconds left of this speech. And so that's why I would recommend using an external timer or using a timer on your phone in order to make sure that you don't lose that valuable information, but also so that your partner is timing so they can also give that information. And now I'm going to transition over to Thomas, who's going to talk about testing out your tech before debates.
Thanks, Val. So now we'll transition to talking about tech testing. So the first thing, and maybe the most important thing, is your audio. You need to test out what you sound like. So record yourself spreading, figure out what the sound quality of your microphone is, and adjust your speed, your volume, and your tone accordingly. All microphones are going to pick up differently. The really expensive microphones will pick up quite a bit but some of the cheap microphones may not pick up everything. So just know what kind of microphone you have and feel free to work around that. Your online debate spreading voice might have to be different from your normal spreading voice. You're not in person. The judge's headphones may not be that good, if they're using Beats. So you might have to slow down or be a little more clear than you normally are. The second thing is you need to find the optimal mic distance from your mouth to maintain your volume. If your mic is very far from your mouth, but it picks up really great, then that may be what works for you. But if your mic isn't that great and you need to put it a little bit closer, that's also okay. Just make sure you don't tap on your mic because your mic will pick up any of that feedback in that contact. Some ways that you can record your audio. Windows has a built-in voice recorder app. Audacity is another option, which is free to download. Zoom does have an audio testing feature, but it won't let you record. If you were using the microphone that's on your, if you're using the microphone that comes with your iPhone, the earbuds, you could use the app on your iPhone, or you can use it on Android. Whatever you do, just make sure you're able to test your audio. A pro tip, don't mess with your audio settings right before the debate. It won't affect your performance, but it will affect your technical settings, which could mess up things for you and your partner. Now I'll turn it over to Dustin, and he'll talk about internet connections.
Thanks, Thomas. So like Thomas said, I'm going to talk about the other really important thing to make sure that you test, which is your internet. You want to make sure that you have a stable, reliable connection and that you're not going to cut out randomly. But even more so than that, you want to make sure that you're not laggy and that your audio quality isn't going to dip precipitously, as you're recording, streaming, whatever the equivalent term is. So one really easy way to do this is to just do a ping test. A couple websites you can do this with, it's free, easy, are pingtest.net and speedtest.net. I don't really fully understand all the mechanics of how the internet works, but it's simple enough. Low numbers are good, consistency is even better. High numbers are bad. Fluctuating ping is worse. If you go to this website and you see, it'll show you kind of like a little line graph. And if you see a bunch of dips and valleys, that's worrisome. And you might want to consider, if you're on Wi-Fi, try to plug into the Ethernet or, move closer to your router. But that's just an easy way to test, how high quality your internet is without having to, chance it in a debate. You want to do tests assuming debate conditions. If you want to be in the same place as your partner, then make sure you're doing your tests assuming that, and make sure your internet can handle that. Otherwise make sure that it can handle you being on a Discord call with your partner or whatever, or if you have a Google Doc running, or if you want to have you're trying to communicate with your partner over GChat. Just make sure that it can handle. And also make sure that you're doing tests for the worst case conditions. It's you want to, we mentioned that you want to try to make sure that your family is kind of avoiding taking up too much bandwidth. You want to stop, kind of any processes that are on your computer that are doing that. But you should still test to make sure that, if something goes wrong or if somebody has a meeting they absolutely can't miss or whatever, or your sibling just really wants to play games and is not going to stop for you, make sure your internet can handle that. And ask your parents or your siblings or whatever to do this test with you. If set up a fake Zoom meeting, or ask your sibling if they don't mind you testing your internet, doing a Zoom call while they're playing League of Legends or Valorant or whatever. Just do those tests so that what's going to happen in that worst case scenario. All right, now I'm going to turn it over to Brandon, who's going to talk about those contingencies to plan for and what to do if they arise.
Hey, now I'm going to talk about...
Shit. Sorry, I forgot about that.
So now I'm going to talk about contingency planning. And there are going to be issues. Online debate has many, and some of them are irresolvable, but there are ways to prevent issues from arising because of your own inaction. So I'm going to focus on the number of external programs that you have running on your computer. You should reduce them. Zoom itself is pretty intensive, and a lot of people don't have $900 computers. I have a $250 computer from Walmart, and it does chug along with Zoom fine, but when I have too many programs open at the same time, it can slow down. So here's what's generally running on my computer at all times: Adobe Creative Cloud, Slack, Teams, GChat, Norton Antivirus, AutoHotkey, the list goes on. And some of these can be disabled for the period of which you're in your debate and right before your debate begins, and your performance will welcome closing all of these programs. Maybe the exception being an antivirus in case your labbies have viruses. So this does not just pertain to the internet using programs that you think about. It can also be stuff that you would close before a regular debate, like your 2 megabyte impact defense file or a massive compilation of back files that people put together and sent to you right before the round. Sometimes even autosave on Word can stall and make your computer run a lot slower. It does come with the obvious advantage, right, that if your computer crashes mid-debate, that the autosave will have all of that work saved. But if your computer is caught autosaving while you are giving a speech, it could slow down and potentially crash Word, which would put the entire debate on pause. You can close and disable a lot of settings like these in Windows. And I'm not sure about Mac, but for example, in Windows, you can actually just make it so animations don't run and the computer itself chugs along without all the tricks that generally make your computer look nice, but don't necessarily help with performance. On Task Manager in Windows, for example, you can make sure a lot of programs don't even turn on when your computer starts up. Your startup time will thank you for disabling all these programs, and it will make your computer run faster and longer without a restart in the meantime.
Hey, Brandon, I actually didn't know about the disabling animation things. Just out of curiosity, what kind of animations are you referring to there? Because I just didn't even
Stuff like Windows transitions, so the speed at which like you open iTunes or Chrome and how fast it pops up.
Cool. Yeah, I had no idea about that. All right, next we're gonna move on to Jonah, who's gonna talk about what you can do with your browser.
So your browser can be another big drain on memory and your computer speed. So I have a few potential solutions that you can implement if that is a problem for you. The simplest one is just to close tabs. I know us debaters, from as soon as we learn how to cut cards, we just constantly have tabs open from various different assignments, different games we're playing, email, all that. But for a tournament especially, you should just really close all of the extraneous ones, and once the debate's over, you can reopen them. If that really kind of irks some people, then I recommend getting, you can tab or you can bookmark all your tabs. So if you have one, like Chrome open that has all of your links to a particular assignment that you're really eager to not lose, instead of just copy and pasting and saving them all, you can just bookmark the tabs. You can also implement a variety of different tab hibernation extensions. There are a few different programs such as the Great Suspender, One Tab, and Tab Hibernation. And these suspend the tabs that you're not actively using. So what that will do is just reduce the overall amount of memory that Chrome is using, and it would only, it's almost as if you're just having the particular tabs open for your debate. And if you're still having some problems despite all of this, maybe change browsers. Chrome uses lots of processing power compared to different ones, and that's especially true if you have lots of tabs open. Now, not browser related, but just a kind of final piece of advice with various tech stuff is that you all should get in the habit of restarting your computer and installing updates all the time. As soon as your computer notifies you that a restart's in order or an update is needed, you should resist the temptation that always existed to just, put it off an extra hour or remind me whenever. But you should really get in the habit of restarting very regularly. You should turn off auto restart settings, and you should install updates the night before tournaments. Do a full restart. Even when tournaments were in person, I always restarted the night before just so my computer was always at its best speed. And if possible, try to do that every night of a tournament. It can only help you. I don't see how it put you at a disadvantage. And it will also keep you out of the habit of just keeping a variety of different docs or programs open, which will always slow you down.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jonah. That concludes the second part of this lecture. The next part that we'll move on to is what to do during the debate and things to keep in mind and problems you might run into. All right, everybody, now we're going to move on to section 3, which is during the debate. And we're going to start off with Thomas.
Yeah, so in any debate round, in person or online, one of the most important things is communication. And so you should make sure that you're communicating everything that you want to communicate. So a question you'll probably ask yourself is, how are you communicating with your partner? In person, it's easy because you all are next to each other, sitting at desks that are adjacent, and you can whisper and use GChat. But virtual, that's a little harder, especially if you all are not in the same room, and it's likely that you won't be. So you have a couple of options. The first is a phone call. Phone calls don't use bandwidth, especially if you make a phone call over your cellular network. So phone calls would reduce the strain that you're putting on your internet as compared to some of the other programs that we'll give. But one of the downsides of a phone call is trying to make sure the microphones are in sync, and sometimes your phone speaker's not that good. And it's hard to use a headset for debating and use AirPods for a phone call. So that's something to keep in mind. A couple other options include FaceTime and Google Meet. FaceTime and Google Hangouts allow for audio only as well as video options, but they do take up a decent amount of bandwidth. Two other options include Skype and Discord. There are audio only versions of Skype, and Discord is an audio only based platform. That way you'd be able to chat, send files, and be able to talk. But note that all of these programs, with the exception of the phone call, do use bandwidth. So you should plan accordingly and make sure you're testing these. But if you're not interested in talking with your partner, there are text-based services, including GChat, Facebook Messenger, or any other text-based services. Some of these will also use bandwidth, especially because you probably won't be sending text messages, since those don't send as fast. But it will be far less strain than using a video or audio only platform. A classic example you could use is Google Docs. Google Docs, of course, allows real-time editing, so you can help feed your partner information or just communicate them about how the round's going. Now, another common practice in debate is giving your partner evidence. Again, in a classroom or a lecture hall, it's so much easier because you just take your computer or, back in the boomer days, you took your pieces of paper up to your partner. Now with online debate, figuring out that can be a little bit tricky, but it's still possible. One option is Google Docs or SharePoint. Make sure you practice with your partner before the tournament, and camp is a great time to practice using Google Docs and SharePoint. Google Docs may not retain the formatting of the card that you're trying to share, but it will retain the highlighting, which is what matters the most, because you'll email out to the chain the card afterwards. And then if you're using Discord to talk to your partner, you can screen share to your partner in Discord. One thing you notice that we probably haven't talked about is Zoom. But that's because if you are having your debate via Zoom, you cannot be in 2 Zoom calls at the same time. So that's not an option. But you could use another video-based application like the ones we've mentioned, as well as BlueJeans. But again, it puts strain on your bandwidth. So now I'll turn it over to Val, and she'll discuss more about communicating with the judge.
So one of the most important parts of debate is the ability to communicate with the judge. And that's equally true in online debate as it is in in-person debate. Ultimately, everything you do and say in a debate, the purpose of it is to make sure the judge hears it, gets it on their flow, and that you're persuasive to them. And so because of that, it's important to think about the ways that you can maintain a connection with the judge in an online format. And one way that you can do, the first way that I think that's most important for you to do that is to make sure the judge can see you. So, make sure that you're not too close to your computer, too far from your computer. Make sure that you don't have your webcam on at an angle such that they can't see you. That may mean if you need to tilt your monitor or you tilt your screen up or down. It may mean if you have an external webcam that you need to position it slightly differently. But it's really important that the judge be able to see you and to mostly, see your whole face. And really importantly, it's important for the judge to be able to see your mouth. And I know that probably sounds, like a weird thing to focus on, but it's not, because most people do watch your mouth when you're speaking because it helps them understand what you're saying, especially when you're speaking very quickly. And that's particularly true for when, a lot of people who have a hard time hearing, especially at high rates of delivery, they will watch your mouth to be able to kind of follow and read your lips. And so it's important that you make sure that the judge can see it. The second thing that's important is that you need to make sure that you can see the judge. So that may mean putting Zoom on an external monitor. You could use a TV if you don't have an external monitor by connecting your computer to the TV via an HDMI cable. Or if those aren't options, you can pin the judge's cell or screen box. I'm not really sure. Whatever they call the little thing that shows someone's camera on the computer on Zoom. And pin it so it always shows up, and then move it to the corner of your screen. Or if not always possible, then right below your webcam or as close to it as possible. This will allow you to watch and read the judge's body language and see the kind of reaction that you're getting from, especially judges who are, both either in person or online, relatively expressive. In some ways, you can actually get a little bit more feedback from the judge because you see them up close rather than from across the room, and you're more likely to notice some of the small, different types of feedback. Are they frowning? Are they, smiling? Are they happy about what you're saying? Are they nodding along with you? It's a lot easier to actually see those things in online debate. It's also important so that way you can know if something has gone wrong and the judge or the other team can't hear you, or that something has gone wrong. So I judged a debate at the TOC where someone's audio stopped working, like they couldn't hear what was happening. Like they couldn't hear their opponents or me, but because they didn't have Zoom open, when they said, is anyone not ready? And I said, I am not ready. They didn't hear me. And then they started speaking, and because they couldn't see the fact that I was trying to wave them down and stop them, they kind of just kept blowing through the rest of the speech. And it caused me to miss the first 30 seconds of flowing. And so the way that you can avoid that is making sure that you can always see the judge at all times, and that you want your partner to be able to also see the judge so they can kind of read the judge's nonverbal communication and maybe tell you hey, they're shaking their head, you should move on, something like that.
One real quick thing to throw in there that just reminded me of is that if you're one of those people who asks, is anybody not ready, you should really work to stop that in the era of online debate, because nobody knows how to answer that question. I've seen way too many times when somebody's like, is anybody not ready? Okay, good, just gets going. Like, you need to, get an affirmative confirmation from everybody in the debate that they are ready.
Yeah, and so that could be that they say you should wait until you have either heard everyone say they are ready or seen them give a thumbs up to the camera or something like that, because otherwise you could end up starting your speech before someone else is ready, and that's particularly bad if the judge is the person that is not ready.
Yeah.
So I am now going to turn it over to Jonah to talk about how to avoid some of the problems you may have with communication in debates.
All right, now we're gonna talk about some communication things to avoid. One of the biggest ones I would say is not to leak, and by that you need to be incredibly vigilant and aware about your audio and video, about when it's on and when it isn't. I think one of the worst things that could happen is not realizing that your audio is on and accidentally revealing your strategy to the other team, whether that be just one argument, an entire position, what you're going to do in the 1AR, what you'll kick out of. You just want to be very careful when your audio is on Zoom for the debate and when you're talking with your partner. But even then, some cases that aren't as detrimental still are not good. You could just be simply disrupting the debate if it's not related to strategy. That could cost you prep time. It runs into the judge's decision time because it will force them to interrupt the debate if to tell you to turn your microphone off, and just trying to make the debate as streamlined as possible with all the different tech that is going around. I think will make it much more enjoyable for the judge and for everybody participating, and trying to just ensure that you don't have any mistaken statements or what have you.
Yeah, I was going to interrupt and say I judged a practice debate during the lead up to the TOC where the block ended, it's like the 1NR finishes and the 1AR prep starts, and the neg team forgot to mute their microphones, and so immediately the 2N goes to the 1N and it's like, so we obviously can't go for this counterplan because it links to the disad, right? Realizes his mic is on, and then like obviously the first thing the 1AR says is the counterplan obviously links to the disad. So you want to avoid making those sort of mistakes in your debates as well.
Yeah, definitely. If you take anything away, definitely avoid that one. Another suggestion is to turn off your camera in addition to your mic during other people's speeches. We've talked a lot about the importance of bandwidth, and cameras are notorious for using a lot of bandwidth. Tournaments might have rules about this. The TOC did, but if you do have a very poor internet situation, then you probably wouldn't really get too much flack from the tournament administrators about needing to keep your camera off. If those rules exist, though, this should probably be a last resort, but definitely something to keep in mind when you're practicing for tournament-like conditions. And if those exist, I would at least talk to a coach or reach out to those tournament administrators about potentially resolving the problem. And my last suggestion is to just make sure you are using the mute button. Anytime you are not speaking, you should make sure you're muted. All of the example, or Val's example, is pretty indicative of this. And I think that you're better off if you meant to say something and you're muted for a second and you can just unmute versus accidentally leaking something. And especially make sure you're muted during prep time. And now I'm going to give it to Brandon to talk about cross-checks.
I appreciate Jonah's valuable insights, and now I'm going to move on to cross-checks. In my experience, cross-checks has been the most changed part of the activity in the online format, and all of this lies in a single factor: delay. In an online format, there is a gap between when a question is asked and answered, and often this can lead to confusing exchanges if not properly accounted for by the debaters. The worst part about delay is sometimes it can vary. Sometimes the delay can be as long as 5 seconds, and suddenly someone's answer comes rushing at you in fast playing format, or it could be nearly imperceptible. And so you have to adjust the way in which you ask and answer questions based on how the delay has been occurring. The general precepts of cross-ex still apply, obviously. You should be courteous, ask good questions, etc. But there are some things that you should try to change. You should try to minimize the amount of tag team cross-ex. Some of it is inevitable just because one person might know the answer to a question while the other doesn't. But you should avoid interrupting people while tag team happens, because when two people are talking at the same time, it can be tough for the judge to handle, especially as it's not all coming from one room. So it's two normally sounding voices clashing with each other instead of being adjudicated almost by the room itself. And so that interruption that used to take 5 seconds in a speech or in tag team cross-ex might now take up to 20 seconds, and people will be woefully unprepared for it. A way to minimize the amount that people have to talk over each other is having a Google Doc open at all times during cross-ex, and then responding back and forth using that, and making it look as if one person has all the answers or all the questions, even while they might not. You should think about asking fewer questions than normal, or at least being prepared to ask fewer questions, because there is often, as a result of delay, just a finite amount of things you can say and a finite number of responses that people will give in the allotted time, and you will find yourself with more time pressures. To be courteous to the other team, I think you should give shorter answers if you can help it. Obviously, there's a strategic incentive to just keep talking during cross-ex, but given that there's a delay that will impose a harsher time penalty, you might want to consider letting up on the other team. And as a broad comment, if people are trying to talk over each other, it's going to be a disaster. And so you should try to avoid it, whether it's from within your team or between teams, because the judge quite literally won't understand it. It is not a situation which you're hearing one person on the right side and one person on the left side, and so you can make sense of it. It's all coming from basically the same audio source, which will make it confusing and disorienting. And now I'm going to give it up to DML, who will talk about non-traditional forms of debate.
Before I move on to that, a couple last things to add on to that, just to emphasize why it's so important to really avoid talking over people, is that one, these kind of meeting softwares like Zoom, Hangouts, whatever, will sometimes have trouble processing audio that's coming from two different sources, so you have no idea which one is going to actually be heard, whether or not your interruption is, even going to register with other people. And then the other thing to keep in mind for why this is so important is that in online debate, these kind of delays and interruptions will very easily spiral, because it's like you'll interrupt and then both people will be confused and both people will be like, what? Sorry, what were you going to say? And it'll just kind of add on to itself. And like Brandon was saying, what could have taken 5 seconds in in-person debate easily spirals into like 30 seconds online.
One other thing I think that's really important to add to this too is that it is so hard to read people's body language in online debate. And so in in-person debate, you can kind of tell if someone has finished speaking, if someone has finished asking their question based on their body language, and you can't do that in an online format. And so if you've been in any Zoom meeting, not even just a debate, you'll know that people frequently start talking at the same time, and there's a lot of, oh wait, no you go, no you go, and that is just going to be absolutely compounded in a cross-ex if you aren't taking the types of precautions that Brandon was describing.
Yeah. Treat cross-ex not as much as a competition and more as a period for clarification. Don't try to win the cross-ex as much as you will, try to get information out of the cross-ex and get what you need.
The last thing I'll say too is that, I feel like this is something we beat students over the head with, and I feel like it doesn't always register, is that cross-ex is for the judge. It's not to be able to, get your opponents to agree to whatever you said or be like, oh no, I was wrong all along, right? Like the point of cross-ex is to communicate your ideas to the judge, and if the judge can't physically hear you, then you have failed at your primary goal for cross-ex.
All right, now I'm going to talk about different ways to utilize non-traditional forms of evidence, like music, poetry, etc., in the online debate setting. And I'll start off by saying that this is clearly really untested ground. So a lot of this lecture has been us issuing kind of more definitive recommendations about what to do, and kind of more clear guidelines about best practice. And this section is different. It's more intended to be about just kind of ideas to work with, and this obviously really depends on what you're trying to do and how you're trying to perform and present this evidence. So it's not really intended to be a comprehensive overview of all the ways you can do this, and just kind of more of a starting point for you to discuss in your labs more in depth and to kind of reflect more with yourself, with your partner, with your squad and coaches. But anyway, the first kind of most important piece of advice that I can give is just lean into the online setting. Broadly, just like, don't pretend like you are there with the judge and the other team in person, because it's obviously not going to have the same affective resonance with the judge. It's just not going to have the same effect. And, you kind of want to think of how you can creatively adapt to the situation you're in. You can find advantages to the virtual format that might not be there otherwise. And think about what the format offers you that in-person debates don't. For example, you can make visuals a much bigger part of the argument than you might otherwise, because in an in-person debate, it's a little bit tough to do that without having like a whole screen to display things on or whatever, like a big drawdown screen, blanking on the word for it for some reason. But in this, you can just share your screen and start playing a video and everybody's got to watch it. So think of how you can adapt to the format. You might want to consider printing out evidence or stuff that you want to read live during the speech, on paper, or like have a hard copy of it so that you can keep your computer dedicated to displaying or playing the media or whatever, or at least like think through how you're going to do that so it seems more seamless. And kind of along that note, in terms of making things seamless, this is just an idea I had that might sound kind of silly, but I actually feel like PowerPoints might be more useful than they seem. Like, it seems cheesy, but it's like, you don't have to put any text in it. You can just use it to display a slideshow, images or videos or whatever. And there's obviously other ways to do that, like there's slideshow features in most picture viewers that you'll have on your computer, but I'm not really sure if you can have things as it might be easier to centralize it. I'm not saying it's the best option for displaying media or anything, but it might be something worth experimenting with if you're having trouble with other formats. I also want to mention just a couple of features in Zoom that might be able to help you. I kind of mentioned this before, but you can play your computer audio through Zoom, so you can just share your screen and play a video and people will hear it. But if you want to use audio and not video, then that might not be the best way to do it, because you have to be sharing your screen. If you don't want to share your screen while you have it going, then that might not be the best idea. You might have to send out a link via the chat or something. Or just play it out loud on speakers and just make sure you do a test beforehand to make sure that everybody will be able to hear a speaker playing through your computer microphone.
Yeah, I'll jump in and say that Dustin and I tested that out where he played music from his computer speakers over Zoom to see if I could hear it, and I had no problem hearing them. And so that seems like it might be a reasonable option if you want to have music playing, but you don't want to share your screen, or in the instance where perhaps you are in a Zoom room where you're not allowed, like you don't have screen sharing privileges, and so you can't share your screen.
Yeah, definitely. And that also, kind of depends on what your setup is like, what your computer speakers are like. So just, experiment with different stuff and make sure you're testing all this stuff out beforehand, recording this stuff, take recordings of yourself just to see what it sounds like. The other thing I'll mention about Zoom is that, Zoom backgrounds, a lot of people aren't, are kind of thinking of it as just, kind of little fun, cute things to do, but you can make an image or a video clip or whatever as your background and, kind of display something, on loop or whatever, or display images and, change your background. And it might be, you probably will have to get good at it and get about doing that quickly, but it's not that hard. And, you can upload a bunch of images to Zoom to use as your background. And then, kind of once you go to choose a background, you can choose between any of them. Now, maybe your computer can't handle a Zoom background or, can't handle a video clip or whatever, in which case maybe sharing screen is a better option. But, just all things to keep in mind. And also keep in mind that if you want to use a video clip as your Zoom background, there's obviously not going to be audio. So, maybe that might be a better situation, but it all depends on what you're trying to do. All right. Finally, we are going to move on to Val to talk about troubleshooting.
So the last thing that we are going to talk about is how to troubleshoot when problems inevitably arise during your debates. So that may involve your computer freezing and crashing. It may involve your internet dropping out. And so we're going to give you some suggestions on how to respond to those situations and how to respond if your partner has those types of tech errors happen to them. So the first priority should be to call or text your partner, ideally using a non-internet form of communication, i.e., like I said, a text message or a call. If you think their internet has stopped working, or if your internet has stopped working because you can avoid the potential inability to communicate via internet. This is a potential advantage to using phone calls as the method of communication with your partner we described above. And this is important because they can then alert everyone else in the debate to what has happened.
Another suggestion is to use the Zoom app on your phone and or call into the debate. You should keep your phone charged throughout the debate, maybe keep it plugged in. But regardless, your phone is an easy way to just kind of like get back in, at least temporarily, to let everybody know what's up. You can call into Zoom meetings, and depending on where you are, you'll have to call a different number for Zoom, but you can enter, as long as you have the number for the meeting, then you can join in via that number. So make sure that you can access the meeting number for the particular round you're in. Write it down. I would suggest doing that before the debate starts, just to make sure. But that way you can just, worst comes to worst and you just can't use your computer and can't get in contact with your partner or whatever, you can just jump right in to let everybody in the room know what's going on.
And if your partner is the person who loses internet or their computer freezes or crashes, like I said before, use like a non-internet based communication, i.e. a text message or call, to check in with them and make sure that they are able to to reconnect or figure out how to troubleshoot. Whether that's they need to go reset their router so they can reconnect to the internet, or if they have no ability to get back on the internet, to figure out if they're going to call into the meeting, or if their computer has just frozen or crashed, find out if they're just going to restart their computer and if they're able to restart in a way that allows you to continue the debate, and then you can keep everyone else in the debate apprised of what is happening.
So if you are reading off of a different document than then you've sent out, or if it's a 2NR or 2AR and you are, you have everything on a Word doc that you want to say, but it doesn't have any cards, obviously, so you're not sending it out. You should save that document before you give the speech, and make sure that you can access it all, if something happens to your computer. And this is something we kind of touched on before. This is sort of a disadvantage to turning off autosave on Word, and that's why doing so should really be a last resort option.
And we already kind of covered this
Yeah.
before. And so the last thing is if your audio or mic cuts out, you should make sure that you keep your headphones on and listen for the judge or the other team saying something. So you would not realize that your mic has cut out, and they may say, hey, we missed what you said, you've cut out, we can't hear you. Being able to hear that from them is really important for being able to stop and figure out where you need to, restart. That's why we talked about earlier, everyone timing the debate is really important, so that way they can say, okay, at this time is when you cut out, so you can figure out how much time, how to reset, where to reset your timer and where to restart. So you could say, like, what's the last thing you heard? The judge or the other team will tell you what the last thing they heard was, and then you can restart from there.
And this is also, if this is a problem that you run into a lot, one thing to consider is that this is another potential advantage to using a phone as your method of communication with your partner, because you can keep a phone call going or something, and maybe have speakerphone on or something so that your partner can give you a shout out if something happens, or if you that your audio cuts out. But that's just another thing to consider if it's something that happens a lot. Otherwise, that might be a little bit clunky of a solution, but yeah. All right, so that's everything that we have. Thank you all so much for listening, and we hope that you have a great summer and enjoy your experience at the online University of Michigan Debate Camp.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.